We finally have some good news. Let's start with this. Senator Chris Van Hollen was able to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia yesterday in El Salvador. We were not sure if he was still alive based on how the administration had been conducting itself. This is the footage, or these are the photos here. You can see that they gave him his clothes back and put a hat on. He's wearing a hat. I don't know if that was the hat he came with, but we know that they shave their heads in CCOT, this notoriously torturous prison in El Salvador. These are the photos that Bukele posted, actually. So
yeah.
Can you find the original from Van Hollen?
Yeah. Because
it's important to note that Bukele, the president of El Salvador, photoshopped these. It's interesting that they did this.
Is it staged or photoshopped?
No, he photoshopped it. Look at the original photo.
Okay, one second.
It's interesting that Bukele allowed for this to even happen, and that there was pressure that created this, which was in part due to the fact that Van Hollen, give him immense credit. This is what democracy looks like in action. This is a senator showing up for his constituent when the rest of the world looked like it had abandoned him. And there's all these right wingers like, he's not a constituent. Okay, well, his wife is. His wife is an American citizen. And constituents don't include voters. Constituents also are just people that you are supposed to be the democratic representative of, small d. That's what this country is supposed to be about. Even people that don't vote for you, if you're a senator in that state, you're supposed to be representing them. And Van Hollen is putting Chuck Schumer to shame here by showing what it actually means to stand up for the American people. But in this photo, you'll see the water glasses are just water glasses. And then when you go back to Bukele's photo of this meeting, you'll see that he has put this photo has salt on the rim of the glasses and maraschino cherries.
No, Nazi.
To make it look like it's a cocktail. Let's go back to his caption. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, miraculously risen from the death camps and torture, now sipping margaritas with Senator Van Hollen in the tropical paradise of El Salvador. Obviously very conscious about the optics of CCOT, which looks like a concentration camp and seems to function as one.
He was calling him a terrorist. What, like 48 hours ago, 72 hours ago? And now he's making jokes about, look at how great this person is treated, that we just, it's like a hotel or something.
And it's really important that this happened for fighting the Trump administration, because they're calling him a terrorist, but they let him out. This means that Bukele can release him. This means that their explanations for why he can't be sent back to the United States are completely bunk, which we already knew that. But you see by the fact that he is out of CCOT in these photos that Bukele has the capacity to do so. He's choosing not to do so under the direction of the Trump administration because he's functioning as their contractor. And you also heard Van Hollen repeat that when he spoke to the vice president in El Salvador, who said, no, the Trump administration is paying us to do this, and that's why we're not releasing him, which means that they're flagrantly violating the Supreme Court's order. But this is how, they're on their heels. This is how you stand up to a bully. Van Hollen is showing what leadership really looks like in the face of fascism and authoritarianism. And then we also have the Fourth Circuit, the federal appeals court in Virginia, which rejected the Trump administration's attempts to stay the judge Paula Zenas's order to facilitate the release of Abrego Garcia. This judge who wrote this opinion is named Harvey Wilkinson. Wilkinson is a Reagan appointee, a conservative judge. And the Fourth Circuit, this is a scathing opinion that goes after the Trump administration's actions here. I just wanted to read part of it because it's so well said. Let's pull this up. Upon review of the government's motion, the court denies the motion for an emergency stay pending appeal and for a writ of memorandus, for a writ of mandamus. I've actually never heard that before. This is why I didn't go to law school. The relief the government is requesting is both extraordinary and premature. While we fully respect the executive's robust assertion of its Article 2 powers, which, by the way, is the part of the Constitution that vests the president's authority in foreign affairs, and that's supposed to be shared with the legislature, but that's what that's referring to, basically, the administration's invocation of foreign policy to make these determinations and to violate him of his due process. We shall not micromanage the efforts of a fine district judge's attempting to implement the Supreme Court's recent decision. It is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter, but in this case, it is not hard at all. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody, that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. The government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident of its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Moreover, the government has conceded that Abrego Garcia was wrongly or mistakenly deported. Why then should it not make what was wrong right? The Supreme Court's decision remains, as always, our guidepost. That decision rightly requires the lower federal courts to give due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. That would allow sensitive diplomatic negotiations to be removed from public view. It would recognize as well that the facilitation of Abrego Garcia's return leaves the executive branch with options in the execution, to which the courts, in accordance with the Supreme Court's decision, should extend a genuine deference. That decision struck a balance that does not permit lower courts to leave Article 2 by the wayside. So basically, this is being generous with the government's claims. But here they reassert why the Trump administration is in violation. The Supreme Court's decision does not, however, allow the government to do essentially nothing. It requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. Facilitate is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken, as the Supreme Court has made perfectly clear. The plain and active meaning of the word cannot be diluted by its constriction, as the government would have it, to a narrow term of art. We are not bound in this context by a definition crafted by an administrative agency and contained in a mere policy directive. And then this other part here is important too. Facilitation does not permit the admittedly erroneous deportation of an individual to one's country's prisons that the withholding order forbids, and further to do so in disregard of an court order that the government not so subtly spurns. I think we're good at this point, but you can just see how definitive this was. And we're not even down this road, but the government's actions here violate the 14th Amendment, which guarantees due process. That is, I mean, it's made clear, even though I think that if Abrego Garcia is to return to the United States, he would have to try to challenge this in court or sue on those grounds. But it's also an 8th Amendment violation, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. He's been sent without due process to a torturous facility, which, let me remind people, they are packed in like sardines. Their skin disease and disease spreads because they are constantly touching one another. It's so packed. They have no blankets. They have no pillows. The LED lights are blaring over them in their basically steel barracks. They can't speak to one another. They can't get a lawyer. They can't speak to a lawyer. They can't speak to their family. They can't look outside. They can't be outside. No sunlight.
Can't get health care.
Can't get health care. Hundreds have died at this facility because of these conditions. That is the definition of cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment. The administration is so in violation of the Constitution that it's almost difficult to find which amendments they're not violating.
Human Rights Watch estimates, based on official data, that there are 109,000 people held in prisons with an official capacity of 70,000.
The Bukele and the Trump administration can no longer claim that they cannot release him because we just saw that they can. What are the arguments that they're going to make in court now? Because they have shown themselves to be complete liars. They are testing the bounds of the Constitution. There's no question. But they're also, I think, burning a lot of political will that they didn't need to, but they're just such fascists that they couldn't help it. There was an article in The American Prospect by Ryan Cooper, which breaks this down. I'll just read a little of this. It's called "The Anti-Immigration Majority is a Mirage." And there are a lot of folks that are more centrist in the Democratic Party that say that we should be abandoning the immigration fight because it's Trump's best polling number in terms of issues. Gavin Newsom called
it an 80-20 issue, and I think it's really suspicious that he is echoing people like Charlie Kirk when people mention 80-20 issues. I think it's kind of a red flag to me, but whatever.
You mean Charlie Kirk, the guy he played patty cakes with on his show and said his son loves?
Exactly.
Oh, that Gavin Newsom.
It's an 80-20 issue, bro.
Who was married to the conservative Fox News commentator, the best is yet to come lady. Yeah, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Okay. This is the popularism that is a disease in the Democratic Party. They act like they don't have control over polling and how things poll, and they can't change public opinion by using the bully pulpit. Well, here this article shows that just Donald Trump's inhumanity and his actions have changed polling. Imagine if there was a united Democratic opposition that was pushing this narrative. The Gallup poll on whether Americans think immigration should be increased or decreased shows a curious pattern. From about 2001, at a high of 65%, there was a steady decline in the fraction of respondents who favored less immigration, with a corresponding upward trend in the faction favoring more. The lines briefly crossed in mid-2020 with a plurality in favor of increased immigration, but starting in 2021, there was a sudden jump back toward restriction. This is around the time the Democrats started conceding this point, by the way. During the 2024 campaign, Donald Trump consistently received his highest approval ratings on immigration. The fraction of people saying that immigration is the most important issue in the country jumped from 9.2% in 2021 to 14.6% in 2024. And Trump's xenophobic stance seemingly paid off, even among Latinos who would be the targets of his mass deportation agenda. He was the first Republican to win the Rio Grande Valley, which is chock full of mixed status families, since 1912. Post-election reporting saw many anecdotes of unauthorized immigrants themselves saying they would have voted for Trump because surely he wouldn't deport hardworking people like themselves. But now that support is fading fast. Most recent polls show the priority of immigration plummeting and majority disapproval for Trump on the issue. In the most recent YouGov Economist poll, he is now 11 points underwater, down 16 points since he was inaugurated. Among Latinos, he is now 46 points underwater on this issue. And that's all. I mean, that says it all. If just Donald Trump's inhumanity and his actions by themselves can change public opinion like this, imagine if we actually messaged on our side. Imagine.
And I would like to say, like, hopefully, on a hopeful note, maybe we're at the end of a lie, because this anti-immigrant sentiment, it also corresponds to the post-financial crisis, downturn of people's economic outlook. This going after immigrants is not the solution to that, and I think more and more people are realizing that they've been sold something false, and they've been misdirected away from the actual cause of people's lack of wage growth and lack of, a better life that they thought they would have.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.